In this tutorial in Cyberlink PowerDirector, we'd like to give you some basics for using the position keyframe to control the location of an object on the screen. We'll have two tutorials on this because there's a lot to cover. You can use a keyframe to control the position value of a graphic object, a video clip, or a title on the screen. When I take this graphic object, this picture of a baseball, and drop it on track number 1, immediately PowerDirector will center it on the screen and make it as large as it possibly can so it still fits. So I'm going to take the mouse and drag on one corner of the image and then move it down to the lower left. What would happen if I'd like to have the ball move around the screen using the position keyframes? That's what we're going to look at in this basic lesson. So if you're relatively new to keyframing, this is one for you. So in order to get into my keyframe controls, I need to double click on my image on this track, and that will open up the PIP Designer. Now at the bottom of the screen below the preview, I have an area for all my keyframe controls. If you do not see this, it may be minimized by clicking on the blue arrow pointing down, and if your screen looks like this, simply click on that blue arrow and that will hide or display the timeline mode for your keyframes. In this tutorial, we're only going to look at the position value, not the other ones. So you notice what it does. When you open up the PIP Designer, it will inherit the location that you had when you were working with that clip, that video, that title in the timeline. And you have an X and Y position under Objects Settings. There are several ways you can control the position. You can actually use the up and down arrow to move the X, which is horizontal, or the Y, which is vertical. Or you can type in a number. I'll do a 0.5 here. Or you can actually take the left mouse button, hold it on the image, and move it wherever you want on the screen. So those are some ways in which you can move it. Now let's move it over time. We're going to use a keyframe. So basically a keyframe says at a certain moment in time I want this object to be at a certain location, because we're working on position keyframes. To start with, you need an initial position. So I have my playhead here and it's on the left side, and my numbers here for my time code refer to my clip, so they're all zeros. Another option you do have if you want to use it is you can click on the other clock, and that will give you the time code relative to the project. So this is actually 1 second and 2 frames into the entire project. Most editors use the time code simply for the clip and not the project, so we'll leave it back with the left clock marked. That's my clip time code. So as it starts at the beginning, I need to set a keyframe. The starting position will be what it is on the screen, those XY numbers. I click the diamond, and that will allow me to add or remove a position keyframe. Now if I play the clip in the preview window, nothing happens because I haven't changed any values over time. In order to do that, I need to take my indicator, hold the left mouse button and drag, and move it somewhere else. We'll move it in about a second here. And then there are several ways in which I can set a new keyframe. One is to click on the diamond. That set a new keyframe. I'll do Control Z to undo that action. Another way is to right click on the red line in the position value and click on Add New Keyframe. There is a third way. We'll do Control Z, and that's actually when I have my position marker somewhere where there is no keyframe and I move my object. We'll move it halfway across here. It will say, you don't have any keyframes here, but you've moved the object. I'm going to set a keyframe where you stopped your mouse. Now if I move again, it doesn't set a new keyframe. It just changes the value of the one that's highlighted. If you notice now, the X number is 767 and 780 is the Y. If I move it back, my X number is 501 and my Y is 780. So sometimes when you're new to this, you think you're setting a third or fourth keyframe and all you're doing is changing the values of the second one. So if I go to play this, we'll hit R play, and it moves between the two keyframes and automatically calculates where it should be to go from this point in time to the next point in time. Now, to move your playhead between keyframes, all you need to do to be precise is click on the right or left arrow. And my left arrow is grayed out here because I have no previous keyframes. It's at the end of the clip. But there is my right arrow, and it moves between the clips. I'm going to move over a little bit and then drag it over. That will set a third keyframe, and we can hop between each of them exactly by clicking on my arrows on either side of the diamond. Also note that when you do this, that the last keyframe controls the location of the object for the duration of the clip. There are none after it, so they will all be at this location of 767 and 780 unless I add more keyframes. Another thing to notice about keyframes is the time interval. Now, if I take this keyframe, I can actually right-click and remove it, but I can also simply left-click and drag it. Now, these two keyframes are much farther apart than these two. Watch what difference that makes. We have motion between keyframe 1 and keyframe 2, and then between keyframe 2 and keyframe 3, much slower. The farther apart they are, the longer time you're taking to get between one point and another, and so the slower the apparent motion. Now, if I put them close together, you'll see quite a different picture here. It moves really quick. Now, the location hasn't changed for either of these values, but the time has. So when we reduce the time between the keyframes, it has to run faster to get there to the same location. So that's how you affect the apparent speed of an object on your screen. We have a couple more things we'd like to show you about keyframing, and we're going to do that in the second part of this tutorial. But we hope this helps you begin to understand what a keyframe is for position and how it begins to work on the screen.